Helby Hansen-Daubia, and you're watching Democracy in Action, the show where we talk about issues affecting you and your community. Cape Town is in a state of terror. Bodies pile up each day of the week as gang violence escalates. Despite the best efforts of the anti-gang unit to disrupt the escalating cases of murder, communities continue to live in a state of terror. Tashrik Truebody investigates.
There was a purpose for our protest action today, and the purpose was that we are tired of the gang violence, we are tired of the drug dens and the drug peddlers in our streets, we are tired of gangsters terrorizing our people, we are tired of our people not being free.
Cape Town, a tale of many contradictory truths. Beneath a trendy town for many with European nostalgia lay a trail of blood, each droplet telling the very same story of survival of the fittest. 2019 has been one of the deadliest years as gang violence show no signs of abating. This in spite of measures by the state to try and curb an industry which has its own criminal economy, henchmen and structures of power. A parallel state essentially has been established with gangs tearing apart the fabric of society as its actions claim the lives of even the innocent. The most recent such murder was in Hanover Park in the Cape Flats, where a 2-year-old was caught in the crossfire, taking a bullet in the head. The attacks by a handful group of thugs have now evolved to the point that it is playing out in broad daylight. While shootings seem to be sporadic, perhaps what we fail to see is an increasing battle for control of power of the illicit economy. Cape Town seemed to have become the fiefdom of the underworld, which has been characterized by drugs, nightclub security, prostitution, and illegal firearms and ammunition. The violence almost seems calculated. We begin by looking at the arrest of Colonel Ludovic Prinsloo, an apartheid-era cop who for 6 years before his arrest was found guilty of selling firearms to gangs on the Cape Flats. His loot is worth more than 9 million rand, and the lives of hundreds, one of whom was a 6-year-old Hanover Park girl. It is believed that 1,066 murders were carried out, with 888 of the guns he sold between 2010 and 14. At least 261 children were murdered or wounded between 2010 and 16 with those weapons. 2 other people, both whom are alleged to be arms dealers, have subsequently been arrested. Since then, many individuals from the underworld have been shot and killed, some of whom are criminal lawyers associated with the underworld. So brazen has this industry become that it has caused rifts in the senior management of the police service, and these individuals are known tax dodgers, some of whom are known to the state. What chance, if any, do communities then stand in the fight against gangsterism and drugs?
Yeah, it's important. Why? Because we are losing our children, man. And even us, as residents in Bishop Lavis, we are prisoners in our own community. Why gangsters is taking over here? So we are just tired of being prisoners in our own community. And our children, that is, if they don't die, they are terrorized because they must join these gangsters. And we just say no, enough is enough. You see what I'm saying? So we are here to make a point to tell them, if they don't want to change, they must go. They must go.
Welcome and good evening to Democracy in Action. My name is Tashirik Truebody. In this edition, we ask, have we lost the war on gangsterism and drugs? Given the pile-up of bodies on the streets of the Cape Flats, are we even close to winning the war? I've drawn guests from both the political, the analytical, as well as social structure of society, and we want to pin through exactly what the issues are with gangsterism and drugs. In studio with me, very honored to have the MEC for Community Safety. He is Alan Windy. Also, Harun Ari is here from the People Against Gangsterism and Drugs, and Alfred de Klerk, a policing analyst who will try and explain to us whether or not SAPS has a strategy, what that strategy looks like, and if anything, whether we could be seeing results yield from that very strategy. Thank you so very much for joining us, and welcome to Democracy in Action. I'd like to start off with you, MEC. Looking at the issue of crime and gangsterism, you hold a political position, but equally it's a position that requires a study, a connecting with people in this particular field to better try and get to the bottom of it. How do you see your role looking at this problem?
So thank you very much, and thank you for the invite. And I think primarily if you look at the constitutional mandate of an MEC and a province specifically, we have more of an oversight role in the existing system. So our job is to monitor an oversight of what's happening in policing across our 150 police stations in the province. We then also, we're the only province that have set up legislation which gives us really a sort of mandate within the constitutional mandate. And so we support and register and manage neighborhood watch systems. So we've got more than 300 neighborhood watches that are now registered. It ranges between 15 to 17,000 volunteers out there. And then the oversight role, but also looking at how we, with our CPFs, our neighborhood watches, and SAPS itself, how do we create that kind of partnership space.
And what is your assessment of this problem?
Well, quite frankly, I mean, we don't have sufficient policemen and women in the province. I think we should have even more than what the norm should be. There's one thing that's for certain, and it doesn't matter which study you look for, we are the murder capital of our country. I took over from my colleague Dan Plato when he became the mayor of Cape Town, and I took over this job on the 1st of November. And so for the first 5 months, that was until the end of March, a few days ago, 1,567 people were murdered in this province. I mean, that's beyond what the United Nations would call a war zone.
And I'm going to ask a bit of a difficult question. Do you think that you and your government is culpable in that?
So, yeah, I mean, it is a good question. It is, what else could we be doing? It's a question that I asked yesterday. I had probably about 25 constitutional lawyers and specialists saying, within the framework, can we be doing more?
Yeah.
What else should we be doing? I believe that if I have a look at the system, I believe we need to devolve power in policing. But remember, it's not only about policing. I think it's about prevention. It's about jobs. It's about the whole of society. It's about the criminal justice system. Even once you get in the gangster space, once you get an arrest, we've probably got less than a 3% conviction rate.
Yeah.
So it's about that space of that's the next space in the criminal justice system. Then you just go to our correctional services. I was in Polesville the other day. I was talking to someone who's been waiting trial for 3 years. So, and we know our jails are overcrowded. And then we look at the illegal illicit economy. It depends on which documents you read, but if you read Gangtown by Prof. Pinnock,
Yes.
Don Pinnock, I think we're estimating that illicit economy at about 6.3 billion. That's from drugs to abalone poaching to kind of security in our nightclubs. This is a very complex space. It's not as if you can just turn a switch. I believe we should change it. We should actually have more oversight at the national level, more management and direction at a regional level, province and local.
And I want to get into that, but I want to quickly go to Harun Ari from the People Against Gangsterism and Drugs. Harun, Paget has always said through the years that this is a war. You've defined it as a war. Where are we in terms of this war?
I think, thank you for allowing us this time with the people. I think firstly, we are at the war in the sense that Firstly, we always maintain somebody needs to take responsibility. And with that, we'll find solutions. Unfortunately, and I must take my hat off for Mr. Windy to say that we are at dire strait. We're losing the battle. But we as Pagat say we're not losing the battle. Although we find political parties today, and that's the unfortunate part, whether we want to say it's ANC or DA or any other political party for that matter, we say they have not done enough in terms of this war that we are faced with.
But when you say somebody needs to take responsibility, is it as simple as that? I mean, we're dealing here with a century-old, very complex problem that has been part of the fabric, the DNA of society.
Well, if you look at the core problem, in 2000, late 90s, we've made mention of political figures that are involved in the drug trade. We've made mention of intelligence agents that are involved in the drug trade. Nobody listened. Years later, we found all these filth coming out in our societies. We can make mention of the intelligence boss being found on the airports with drugs physically on her. We can make mention of Steve Chueti that was found and was imprisoned for his involvement in the drug trade. And there are many of them. It didn't stop. That's the problem. That is the only thing that we still identify is the corruption is still deep within political parties. And not only political parties, but also within the forces that are there to supposedly be to protect our community, which is the SAPS and the intelligence agency and law enforcement.
Yeah.
There is still corruption in that.
Yeah, on that score, to bring in Aldred de Klerk, policing analyst. Aldred, if what Harun says is correct, what prospect, if any, does the anti-gang unit stand if they are protected politically?
Well, let's quickly understand that we have both a definitional problem, and as Harun and both the MEC says, we also have historical problems. Our definitional problem is simple. We've reduced gangs down to something that a gang unit can fight. Now, that may be a good populist call, it may be a good slogan, but as Bhagat has already showed, there's an element to this that needs to mobilize the energy and resourcefulness of communities, and they did that well. There's the vigilance and accountability that communities can ask of political figures, including SAPs, and there is the insights that they bring to the table. So that's one part of the policing equation. We have lots of challenges when it comes to police itself, and we need to recognize where this police comes from and the fact that this is not a police that can actually police in the 21st century.
What does that mean in practical
What that
sense?
means is that they don't have the skill set.
Yeah.
They don't have the analytical and intelligence capacity, and that has been shown to be so. And they, more importantly, they don't have the depth of leadership. They have young, enthusiastic police officers who are trying their very best. Yet we need professionalism, we need integrity, and we need accountability within the policing structures. And unfortunately, that's a leadership issue. And to my mind, we need to simply change the leadership of the police.
Yeah.
That's a start. And then we need to understand that gangs are part of this criminal economy that the MEC is related to. That is everything from abalone poaching to spaza shops, to the illicit drug and alcohol economy, to protection, to extortion. All of that is part of gangs. It's not and the young people who we see on our streets firing the guns are cannon fodder. Essentially, they are young foot soldiers who will get used by organized criminal entities that are supported by high-powered lawyers, by accountants, and by a whole slew of a system that actually keeps it in place.
So is there then a link between these reports that we are seeing of people like a Nafiz Modak, a Mark Liffman? We saw lawyers of theirs, criminal lawyers, Peter Mihalik and so on, that all died on the streets, hits on their lives. Is that, the extent to which this battle goes on, that there are the cannon fodders and there are those big fish that seemingly are the ones that are controlling this entire illicit economy?
Indeed, the links are there, and the links are there for everybody to see. Look, everybody, regardless of the accusations and the allegations against you, is entitled to the best defense. So nobody's saying that those involved in crime shouldn't have lawyers on their side. The difficulty comes when, as already been alluded to, when the criminal justice system itself gets compromised. And remember, the criminal economy will set out to compromise individuals, They'll set out to compromise procedures and structures, and it could be simply saying to somebody, oh, forget about that thing on your desk for 2 days. It's as simple as that. It doesn't mean grand corruption of the scale that has been coming out through our inquiries. It could be somebody releasing information that something's about to happen. All those things add up and provide the criminal economy with an advantage that ensures that they can continue to exist.
This is Democracy in Action. We're talking about whether or not we can win the war on crime, and it seems very complex, as MEC Windy had to say a bit earlier. I want to bring you back, MEC, to try and understand then where is, because I hear you talking about greater oversight, I hear you talking about operational control of the South African police services, but it seems quite difficult to just address this purely from a policing perspective. Where else then do we address this? Because, I mean, I want to bring you back to your comment a bit earlier when you said that it's not just about policing. And if we look at the extent to which this problem has gone, is a lack of social programs by your government at the center of this problem?
So, I mean, I want to come back to who's responsible. I'm prepared to take responsibility. I'm prepared to stand up and say, okay, let's start creating a nexus to deal with this scourge that is actually taking the future away of our young people. I mean, young people that are hooked into these gangs and into these drugs, their futures are being ripped apart. And so I'm saying I'm standing up and let's do that. Secondly, I think before I get into the program, secondly, I want to say that I think about the last 10 years in executive office in government. My job has been, how do I grow jobs? How do I grow the economy? How do you create the ecosystem and the enabling environment? Because governments don't do that. Private sector does that. We remove the red tape, or we put the right skills in place, or we make sure the education system is giving the skills and the potential skills for that economy. Now, on the other side of the railway line, now sitting in this space, it's the opposite. How do we apply exactly the opposite? We need to shrink the number of illegal jobs. We need to shrink this economy. So we've got to start applying those kind of removing the ecosystem. And I think that is much more important than the policing or the criminal justice system, or because of course they've got to be in place.
You say that, MEC, but I know you're not in the city, but then we see stories like the city giving tenders to wives of known gangs. I mean, thugs that control this illicit economy.
Well, I certainly hope that investigation is completed as quickly as possible. What I believe, it was a subcontract of a contract. But of course, now that information is out, I mean, we must be able to remove that immediately, because of that exactly, that is how the illegal economy tries to become legal, through these washing processes of taking illegal money and then using it into the formal economy. And so really it's about prevention. And that was your question. And I'm absolutely certain we can do lots more. So for example, I think an amazing program is this Chrysalis project. This Chrysalis program, I was there on Saturday, where 200 young men were at risk in society. They were taken out, they were put through a 3-month program, given various skills, and then what we do is we give them a job for a year. Because you can't just put them back into society because your friend down the road is just going to pull you back into where you were. So we give them a job for a year. Now, how do we expand that? And of course, these are budgetary decisions that we've got to make. But it's not only that, it's about the whole of society. How do we work together as society to say, if we are serious about that, who are the different role players? But I'm happy to be that nexus in the middle to say, we need to do something differently. I mean, I've just read the analysis of crime in cities in South Africa, the urban crime report, and between 2010 and now, our murder rate has gone up by 70% in the city of Cape Town. Come on. And obviously this drives much of it. It's not the only driver. There are a whole lot of other drivers of the murder rate, but definitely in the city of Cape Town, our gangs, the drug trade, it is definitely connected in a big way. School kids do homework. I use this always. I say they have to do homework underneath the table in the kitchen, because that's the safest place to do your homework. You've got to, if you want to phone for an ambulance in a red hotspot zone, the ambulance can't come and help you because you've got a real crisis. They've first got to go past the police station. I mean, that's not a normal society.
It absolutely isn't, and I look forward to trying to understand how exactly you're going to be trying to navigate around it. Alan Windy says he is the man who's going to take responsibility for it. We found out what can be done and what role he could play in trying to resolve this problem. This is Democracy in Action. Do stay with us. We'll be back shortly. It's Democracy in Action, and we're talking about the crime in the Western Cape. Cape Town in particular. Is this a war? Well, we've heard it is. But how far off are we in actually winning it? MEC Windy, before the break, says he's the one who will take responsibility for it. We'll try and figure out how exactly he can go about fixing this problem. And I'd like to bring Harun in here from the People Against Gangsterism and Drugs. Harun, how do we do so? I mean, the movement itself has largely been criticized for its strategies. Well, it depends on who did the criticizing. But what Eldred said earlier, you guys did well in galvanizing community support. Has that died down? Is there a sense here of communities just accepting the situation for what it is?
Yeah, I think what was important for us and still currently is important, that we need to have a mindset change amongst this community and society. We believe and we hear the story of state capture. We believe people's minds and belief systems have been captured by the crime that we see today. That needs to be unwinded. People in the positions that they hold, whether it's from a religious perspective or political perspective, they need to unwind people's mindsets to reaffirm that fear that they live with. We've heard that kids need to do homework under the table, which is not the norm. And there are many things that we can carry on with. The question is, how do we take this forward? In the sense that people are living in fear, for one, and that's not going to change if we as leaders or people as leaders in society don't reaffirm the people that there is hope.
But should we displace that fear? And I ask the displacing of the fear against the backdrop of instilling that fear in that gang lord.
Well, we've proven, as PAGID, we've proven over the years, when faced in the streets with drug dealers, they know where to be found. They wouldn't dare pick up a firearm. They wouldn't dare pick up a fight with us. If you find policing going to the streets, you'll find a war zone. If you find the army going to the streets, you're going to find the same thing. And we mustn't undermine drug dealers and gangsters in this country in terms of the armory and the military forces that they have. Because they've proven to us in Bishop Lavers that they will shoot on the police, and nothing happened. Whether they caught or did not catch the culprits, that's irrelevant. The fact that they could muster the power and the strength to attack a police vehicle, or police vehicles for that matter, that in itself says that there is no fear from their side. We've proven when PAGID goes to the streets with the people, and the support is there, people want change. But we find it somehow down the line, when we call the people to the streets, there's some intelligence creeping in. Intelligence reports will come out and say, well, PAGID has or has an intention of creating violence or havoc in our society, so therefore we cannot allow this proceedings to take place.
On that. Violence relative to what? Because, is it that when a community, let's say PS PAGID would galvanize a community, but when a community rises up and takes a message to a known gang lord, a drug dealer, etc., if the people are threatened during that period, do you inherently believe in, whatever means possible, or even the right to defend yourself against somebody like that? And in that instance, we could see a potential violent altercation.
We believe in the Constitution, which inherits us the right to defend ourselves in any situation. We're not going to wait for a criminal to enter homes to defend. If we're walking in the street, we have the right as per Constitution to defend ourselves. So we're saying when we do the application to go to the streets with the people, and there is a possibility of an altercation, people have the right to defend themselves. We've seen this in the apartheid era, where people had the right to defend their human rights. This is a clear violation of every human being's violation of their human rights in this country. We cannot have a 2-year-old being killed on the streets because of negligence of the state. This is the reality of it. We cannot have children that is being abandoned because the mother is a drug addict and she cannot look after that child. We find this. We find babies being dumped on the streets, in bins, in rivers, We find this is the sad side of our society. The question is, when we are faced with these things, we have the right to defend. And people need to understand that. And I think our people and the community is by that point where they know they have the right to defend. But when they rise up, and we've seen this in the last few months or years, I would say early last year, where we had an uprising in Bonteville, we had an uprising in Kensington, in Kenfrack. Where are those people? We find it very strange that people can muster the energy and the strength to fight over utility bills, which they have a right. But the person or the individuals responsible for killing the moral fibers of our society, there's not even a voice from any religious fraternity. And I'm making a broad statement, any religious fraternity. We'll find occasionally politicians like Mr. Windy has said, he'll take responsibility, but he's willing to make change. We find that, and majority of the time, people are just turning a blind eye on the reality on the streets.
Yeah.
And we live amongst that reality. We see this reality on a daily
I just want
basis.
let me see, are you being a politician when you're just saying that I'm going to take responsibility here now? I mean, we're in an election period. We have a very real problem. Communities don't have time to be fooled by politicians that want to claim as if though they're going to take responsibility. How serious are you about that?
So, I mean, it is the upfront most important point that I raise in a manifesto. And a manifesto is a document that says, should I be elected, this is my plan. It's not about the election campaign, it's about what you do a day one after the election campaign. I'm serious. I mean, that's why yesterday I think there must have been 25 constitutional law experts in one room saying to me, without getting a change of a national system, and I don't do that for the Western Cape, that's for South Africa, what else can we do in this province? I believe that it's not only about, and I mean, everybody that I speak to, I always use my hands in speaking. It's very difficult when I got a mic, but I say on this side, it's about murder and rape, and it's about robbery and, corruption and everything in between. But on this side, it is coming to the moral fiber. It comes to the value set of society. And quite frankly, I think our value sets are deteriorating at a rapid rate. How do we, and that's why I've used the word whole of society. How do we build a whole of society partnership where everyone comes together and says, actually, we're going to start changing this? And this issue is not an issue that can be fixed overnight. But I seriously do believe that crime at the moment is holding back education. Crime at the moment is holding back our healthcare and the health and wellness of our society. It's holding back jobs and it's holding back investment. So if we don't sort out crime, we can't sort out any of those other things. And I seriously believe that a provincial government needs to start to play a different role. We'll push for more power, but even within the framework, that's the question that I'm asking us. So I'm really serious about this.
Yeah.
We have to deal with crime in our system, and of course, gangsterism is a
That
major
meeting that you
role.
had with those lawyers, anything to do with the fact that you're planning some legal action against national government concerning management of the police service?
So that'll only happen after the election, because it's part of what I want to really change. But the question that was asked, and I've got an advisory board, and the advisory board were actually running it yesterday, and it's about, the question was, within the existing constitutional framework, what else should we be doing? What else could we be doing? Do we have other areas that we can actually find more powers? Can we stretch or push the boundaries? Because quite frankly, what I'm asking about at a national level could take 2-3 years if we get it right. I don't know if we're going to get it right. I'm going to work on it.
To attend.
But let's work within the framework we've got at the moment, because we can't just wait.
I want to bring Eldred in there. Eldred, and it is a DA government policy to say, let's give the management, the control of the police to the province, to the city. Let's have some, not just greater oversight, but actual operational control. Constitutionally, that at the moment is not allowed. What is your sense? Would we have a change in our current landscape?
Well, I have a different view, and my view is very simple, that police ought to be the professionals. The how of policing should be in their hands. And that's the police. The police are part of a much broader structure that forms policing, and that includes the energies of individuals and communities. That's the one side. When it comes to political oversight of the police, oversight seems to be defined as, oops, I didn't see that. Let me look at something after you've done that. There needs to be this idea that oversight is informed by monitoring. It's informed by setting priorities jointly. It's informed by people accepting their responsibilities, and that's the MEC and the provincial commissioner. Provincial commissioners have an extraordinary amount of control over their budget, over their deployment, and over the use of their resources within their provinces. It's not wholly a national competency. Provincial government, together with the MEC, who's the representative of provincial government on safety and security, should and ought to be having a relationship with the provincial commissioner that allows the two of them to sit down and bring their respective competencies and authorities to bear on the situation. Devoid of personalities, devoid of political ideology, that's to my mind, a constitutional imperative.
Yeah.
It's an imperative within the Police Act. So that's the first thing. That's that. Having been said that, this province had in place, except they failed to implement it, probably the best anti-gang strategy that has been designed ever. By docs, with a number of us having given input into that, they failed to implement it. And that
What does that look like in short?
well, in short, it called for an interdepartmental sit down, and each department, whether it's social welfare, education, transport, aligns their key objectives and their strategies to ensure that they impact the environment that gives rise to gangsterism and crime. That's
Because if you give a child a job, he's not going to stand in the corner and get involved in drugs.
well, indeed, but on the other hand, let's get back to the city and the province. I mean, to my mind, we have too many provinces. That's the first thing. The second thing is
You're putting
that-
Alan Windy out of a job.
that, well, I mean, we may go back to 4, and then the Western Cape incorporates the Eastern Cape and Northern Cape, and then then it's a bigger province to govern over. This city is one of the most expensive in the world, right? This city has very little opportunity for you and I to acquire any kind of property or land. This city's rates, taxes, and water bills are going out, is going all crazy. The city is ready for the people of Cape Town to stand up and take it on politically, socially, and otherwise. All those factors are exploited by the criminal economy. There's a very unbenign welfare that happens when you have to bury somebody, whether an auntie, a gogo down the road cannot afford a plate of food. Gangsters will buy that plate of food, and at the same time, she has to hide a gun or drugs under her pillow.
And I mean, we've seen video footage of these guys handing out money, paying for
Ab-
funerals.
Absolutely. So for me, it's not about the decaying moral fiber. It's because most people are law-abiding. Most people try to go to work every day. Most of us try to do the very right thing. There's no lawlessness when it comes to this idea that my aunties and uncles, my cousins, yours, your brothers, are running around the street and running amok. No. So stop saying this thing about people's moral fiber is going out the window. No. Look at the material conditions and the quality of lives of those peoples, and look at the opportunities and the vulnerability that gets exploited by the criminal economy.
We have to wrap up shortly, but I want to come back to strategy, right? So we have the anti-gang unit, we have politicians taking responsibility, going to parliament, sitting in portfolio committees, giving updates on what's being done. We have the different law enforcement agencies that are around. One of the things that Becky clearly achieved when he was National Police Commissioner was a sense of optimism in the police when he said shoot to kill. As constitutionally as questionable as that was, when Paget was around, Paget took the fight to a gangster's house. Should we be knocking more heads against doors in order to disrupt the current status?
Well, we should be knocking more leadership heads together. That's the first thing. And secondly, we should look beyond the simplistic and reductionist views of gang units. What we need, and we need the same kind of advisory, team, broad-based, across people who understand the material and social conditions, who understand the definitional aspects of policing, and then operational police, intelligence investigators, and prosecutors sitting together for 3 to 5 years to impact this thing.
Okay.
Rather than just have 95 people running around the Western Cape trying to make a difference.
Okay, so that is what is needed to be done. Harun, very quickly, I'm going to round off with MEC. The man has taken the responsibility. Is the MEC for community safety? In 2 seconds, quickly, what is the first thing he needs to do?
I think what we need to do is, and what our colleague has said, that we need to join forces. We need to sit down at one table. We need to put our heads together, and we've always maintained that. Pagut's hand is there for extension. The moment the MEC's offices has been opened for Pagut, we've been there on numerous occasions. Unfortunately, that's not the same on SAP's side.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we at loggerheads with SAPs. We're saying, once again, we are willing to sit down, we are willing to make change together with those in authority.
Okay.
And obviously there needs to be
MEC,
proper
we have to come to you. We
guidelines.
have to go. 2 seconds, very quickly. People want to talk to you. Are you going to call a summit of some sort?
I've already had the first safety summit. I've got an open door, but I want to have one slight
2 seconds, 2 seconds.
or different opinion there. I mean, we are already involved in that anti-gang subcommittee. The anti-gang subcommittee was not consulted when the anti-gang unit was brought in. I send a letter every single month to the minister on various areas where we want to cooperate, and I really do want to cooperate because I believe that is the way we've got to get it right. Hopefully after the election, we can get all the election nonsense out the way, and we need to build cooperation where we all come together to find that nexus on actually dealing with this issue.
And that's the commitment they've all given. People need to work together, need to hold hands and come up with a strategy. Let's see if it pans out that way. Alan Windy says he's taken responsibility. Let's hold him to account as elections nears and as we round up elections. That Cape Town has a gang war. We seem to not be getting anywhere in terms of that war. But now with this level of commitment given by most of the parties, let's see where we can go to. Thanks so very much. This has been this edition of Democracy in Action. We looked at the war against gangsterism and drugs and if we are anywhere close to winning it. It's been a pleasure having you as on the program this evening. Thank you so very much and all of the very best.
That's all we have time for this evening. Thank you for joining me, Helga Jansen Daubia, and our crew here at Cape Town TV. Till next time.